our recently released Africa Insights 2024, our maiden flagship report on democracy and governance, did highlight the role of the military in politics in Africa. What our data show is that Africans are still strongly committed to democracy. They prefer democracy to all other forms of government. So across the 39 countries that we surveyed the last time, 66% of Africans said they prefer democracy to any other form of government. A similar proportion of Africans, a majority, also reject military rule. And so the data does show that rejection of military rule on the continent is a majority view. The other point we highlighted in the report is that the extent to which Africans rejected military rule 10 years ago has reduced quite significantly today. And so 10 years ago, more than 70% of Africans said they reject military rule. Fast forward to today, we have about 66% of Africans saying that they reject military rule. So we see there has been a decline. So there has been a softening of the extent of resistance of military rule. But still, we have a majority of Africans who say they do not want military rule. The other finding that we have in the latest survey is that when we asked Africans whether or not the military should intervene in politics if their elected leaders abuse power, this is where we see a small majority, 53% of Africans say that yes, the military should intervene if their elected leaders abuse power. And so here we should make a distinction between military rule and military intervention. So the intervention, Africans see it as a temporary solution to a problem that they encounter. That is, when their elected leaders abuse power, they want a shock in the system that can correct something that they want changed. And so even though a slim majority say that they would welcome military intervention if their elected leaders abuse power, we still have a solid majority that say they do not want military rule. So military intervention should be separated from military rule. So while they may welcome military intervention to solve an immediate problem, Africans do not want the military to stay in power. Majority reject military rule on the continent. What is driving these attitudes of commitment to democracy? And the report we released recently shows that Africans' commitment to democracy, that is their support for democracy, is driven by political factors and not economic factors. So when elections are not delivered at the highest quality, or when citizens experience poor quality elections, when there's rampant corruption, and when there's lack of rule of law, or if elected leaders are seen to be living above the law, these are the factors that tend to undermine Africans' commitment to democracy. When we try to check if economic factors, government performance in improving lives, government's performance in reducing poverty and the like, these economic factors do not impact, are not in any way associated with Africans' commitment to democracy. So we should make that distinction clear, and that is clarified in this report, that commitment to democracy or support for democracy is affected by political factors, not economic factors. The only indicator in our data, or the indicator that is in our data that is affected by economic and political factors together, is satisfaction with democracy. The extent to which Africans are satisfied with democracy tends to be affected by both political and economic factors. But when it comes to their commitment to democracy or support for democracy, economic factors do not impact that variable. It is the political factors, corruption, lack of rule of law, as well as the quality of elections. If elections are not of the highest quality, Africans tend to be less committed to democracy. And then finally, also on military intervention or military rule. So the softening of the military rule on the continent is driven more by political factors than economic factors as well. So when Africans increasingly begin to relax the extent of resistance to military rule, it's all driven by the political factors, that elections are not of the highest quality, that there's rampant corruption, and that there's lack of rule of law, especially official impunity. When these factors go down, these are the factors that tend to drive Africans' support for military rule. So support for military rule may start to go up when corruption in government is increasing, when officials go unpunished for committing crimes, and of course when elections are of poor quality, then the attraction to military rule begins to grow.